Montana, water buffalo in Montana, is that right?
Just bison.
Just bison?
Buffalo, yeah.
Yeah.
Yellowstone Park is loaded with them. You kind of drive through the park and see those things everywhere. And there's a few ranches in town, like Ted Turner is a really prominent landowner, businessman, obviously. And he's got a huge ranch here outside of Bozeman that you can drive through and see all his buffalo as well. So you got a ton of them.
That is fast. I've never seen a buffalo. Well, I guess I've seen a buffalo at a zoo before, but I've never seen it out in the wild.
And
Montana,
you see them up close right next to your car. It's a different experience, especially when they're the size of your car.
I was just saying, it probably dwarfs your car. It's very hard to wrap your head around the size of a creature that
I used to have a little Subaru WRX, and the first time I had to drive through like a herd of them, I was like, oh my God, they are the size of my car.
That's wild. Wild. So are you originally from Montana?
No, my wife is, though. She grew up here. I grew up in North Carolina. We moved out here about 7 years ago. She made the mistake of bringing me out here one summer, and I was like, okay, well, love this. This is great. All the recreation you get to stay in. I love to fly fish, hike, run, ski. So you do get it all right here within 15 minutes, no matter where you are.
Amazing. The only thing you're missing is my favorite thing, which is the ocean. But it is very appealing to get out there to Montana.
I do miss the ocean. It's very hard to get to from here.
Yeah, quite a bit of a few states to drive through or fly over.
Yeah, and you don't get a whole lot of direct flights out of Montana, so it takes a little bit of time to get to a warm ocean. You can get to the Pacific where it's kind of chilly, but
yeah. Yeah, it is a little chilly. I will give that. Although we're New England here, we're chilly water is just kind of our way of existing. Well, this is such a cool time and space for us to get to chat about all things community. Before we dive into the meat and potatoes, I'd love for you to tell some folks who you are, a little bit more about your background and what your pursuit is as it relates to community.
Sure. So most folks in the space call me Yarby. It's a nickname, Jason Yarborough. So when I was an intern out of college, a group I worked with was like, Yarborough's too long, Jason's boring, we're going to call you Yarby. And it, thanks to social media and meeting people, it just kind of stuck for the last 20 years. So that's kind of how the nickname originated. Kind of been in the partnership world for the last, we'll call it decade. We're within 8 years now. So we started out working at a little company called PFL, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and then moved over to Terminus, where I was VP of Partnerships and got to work with everyone's friends, Sangram Vajre, Justin Keller, and a few really great people over there. And then from there, moved over to Drift, where I was VP of Partnerships for a little while. And then recently branched out on my own to start this company called Arcadia, where I've been initially launched out to consult with B2B tech companies around how to build, scale, and operationalize partner programs. And it's kind of since turned into a couple of different things. One being the Arcadia Leadership Experience that we host here in Bozeman in the summer times. It's a smallish, intimate conference that we do for really GTM leaders with the approach of how to build partner programs that exist within those functions. We are launching a smallish community come soon. My wife and I, Sam, who's also in partnerships, we have a lovely little podcast called Friends with Benefits. Layers of puns within that one. It's all about, the relationships the work that it takes to build those purpose-built relationships that, obviously become partnerships, being that we're partners. It all works out. Other than that, I live in Bozeman. You got 2 small kids, 5 and 3. Got Lucy, who's laying on the floor behind me, and we recently just got a kitten. So we're all in the things.
You got all the things going on.
Yeah.
I'm sure your house is all kinds of fun chaos with lots of different creatures out there making their own fun.
Lots of energy in the Yarby household, that's for sure. We have a lot of fun.
I believe it. That's so fun. Well, I have to imagine. Okay, so I love the name of your podcast, Friends with Benefits.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely hilarious. Is there a backstory to the name, or did it just the name is so obvious?
It's kind of been a running joke for a while. It's like when I try to tell my family like what I do, like I've been in this space for 8 years, and my mom was recently out here for right around Thanksgiving. She's like, I still don't know what you do. And it's like, we always joke that like we get paid to make friends and business is good, right? And they're like and they're kind of like friends with benefits from a business perspective. Like we can generate revenue, we can generate, awareness, and all sorts of things in the industry via our quote unquote friends. And so we always talk about like, we should do something together, being Sam and I and my wife. And so we should start a podcast. And we just kind of started riffing one day. Like, wouldn't it be funny if we had a podcast called Friends with Benefits? We just both kind of chuckled and kind of floated the idea past a few people. And I was like, yeah, this is it. This is right. This is fun. Let's have a little bit of space and a little bit of fun and cheekiness in the space. And so we launched a podcast, about a little over a year and a half ago.
Amazing.
And so it's all about these friends we make.
What I love about the way that you're contextualizing partnerships is that you're demystifying the sense of partnerships that makes it less transactional to build these connections in the business context. And you're making these connections far more relational. You're starting at the core of what it takes to build an effective and close relationship. And you're not starting at the point of transactions, right? Of generating revenue bidirectionally or unidirectionally as well.
Right.
Where does that come from for you? I mean, when I think of PFL, when I think of Terminus, like, these are brands that have always led with that same relational mentality. But I have to imagine this is intrinsic for you.
Yeah, I would say it's really a part of like who I am at my core. Like I am very much a relationship driven person, and relationships mean everything to me and they matter. And I know in this context of partnerships, like if you find kind of what drives the other party, what is most valuable to them, what matters most to them, like you're really trying to build this relationship, right? Because if you're trying to become friends with someone new in your town, right, you're trying to get to know what matters to them, like what's important to them, what drives them, what do they enjoy doing, so on and so forth. And, there's certain benefits that can come out of any friendship, any relationship and whatnot. And I believe the same thing to be true, like within these partnerships that we build on behalf of these businesses, right? At the end of the day, we're just building relationships with people, right? If I'm building a relationship with Kyle or Andy or Mallory or anybody that I'm working with from a partner perspective right now, it's like, I want to get to know you, what's important to you, what's driving you with your business, what are you rewarded on, and how can I best provide value to you to be that best partner that you've got and that you can rely on. So I know if I can like establish this trust by providing value, then I can build a relationship, and I know that eventually that relationship will equal ROI, right? I think it's about making the little investments here and there into the person, into the relationship, and then till you can begin to draw on that eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so simple, and yet we've found ourselves in this era of overcomplicating that.
Yeah.
What do you think is underneath? What underpins this overcomplication we're want to do in the business space with developing authentic relationships rather than playing the end game of transactions or transacting with one another?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get hung up in that end game of the transaction, right? Maybe you've got a CRO or a boss or whoever you're reporting to. That's like, we need revenue now. Like, we need this now. We need to drive to this number. Your number's $2 million. Go get it. And at that point, if you're not focused on like how you can build relationships and how you can be strategic in nature, like you're just going to go be a glorified BDR, and that's all you're going to focus on. It's like, how do I hit my number? How do I hit my number? And you're not focused on like the long-term gain, right? How do I build this relationship so that it's effective for both of us for the long haul? Because if you keep going to your partner and you're saying, I need some leads, I need some opportunities, I need to close some deals, like that's all you're going to be known as. But if you're going to your partner, it's like, hey, we're doing this event. Love to have you co-sponsor it with us. We're expecting 600 people. Like, all these leads could be ours. We could work these opportunities together. Then you're providing real value to like the greater team outside of just yours. And so the more you think about it from a long-term game and more of a go-to-market initiative versus just a BDR initiative, I think the better off you are, and the more likely you are to try to figure out like what's the underlying driver of this relationship.
Yeah, I mean,
on top of that, like, how do you get to know them?
Well, exactly. I mean, the myopia, is that a word? The myopic nature? Yeah, the myopia of the space in which we exist, right, in B2B tech, has forced us to think with such short-sightedness on immediate wins instead of long-term gains.
Well, talk about it a lot. It's like these companies come with these high valuations, in turn result in high expectations for your team to deliver in a very short amount of time. And when you're selling off relationships, it's not something that you can begin to just like cash in immediately.
Right.
You have to establish that trust. And just like with any relationship, trust takes a while to develop. You don't come into a role with that built-in trust. You're going to be kept at an arm's length for a while, then you'll get invited a little bit closer and closer in the inner circle. But that takes a few months, right? And over time, it'll begin to pay off. And one of my favorite stories where it really began to click for me was during COVID. And so when I was at PFL, and obviously, as we all know, during COVID, everybody just stopped spending money. Everything shut down. So our teams were just losing deals left and right. But what I was able to do is like, I was able to go to my partners. I'd spent a year and a half, 2 years, like building these relationships. And all of a sudden, like, I was able to bring opportunities in to the point where I was 50% of all close one revenue coming in during COVID. Amazing. Because I was basically selling based off these relationships that I developed and this trust that I had gained. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is how we build this. This is why relationships matter so much in the partnership space, because there's going to come a point in time where it's going to be all you've got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a CMO, I would consider myself a lazy CMO because I want everybody but my team doing my marketing for me. I want my customers doing my marketing for me. I want my partners out there doing my marketing for me, because that dark funnel action, that word of mouth referral, is way more potent than any marketing I can put out into this world.
Yeah, that's it. And that's really all we're doing with partners, right? We're trying to create them as an extension of our team, of our message, of our brand, of our marketing. And if you do it right, they're going to be the one you think of first. And I want to be the partner they think of immediately. Yeah. Like one of my first questions I ask when I come into a new role is like, what are your expectations? What's going to make me your most valuable partner?
Mm-hmm.
Simple. There's been quite a few times where people are like, well, no one's ever asked that question.
Surprising. They're not asking the right questions. And then they're not the right partner, arguably, in that context.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They got the wrong focus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the context of community, right? Because partnerships, I'd say, as I look at the ecosystems of community that could exist within an organization or around a brand, the partnership ecosystem is a really interesting one in the context of community, because so often we think of community as customers or evangelists. But in this context, walk me through how you define community.
Within the partnership space?
Yeah. You could also even go with the macro and say, like, in totality, what is community?
It's actually a really favorite topic of mine. I feel like most partner programs, I actually put a post up on LinkedIn about this not too long ago, but let me back up. So in the partner space, we refer to like our programs as partner ecosystems, right? But in reality, what most companies are doing is treating it as like a partner bucket, because an ecosystem requires all the constituents or pieces thereof for it to thrive and to grow and to be healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the definition of an ecosystem is like a synergistic collection of folks that have mutual benefits to one
another.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so within the partner world, there you've got your ISV, your tech people, your independent software vendors, your integration partners, aka all those names. Then you've got your agency partners, right, who are completely different than a tech partner. Then you've got these, we might consider like a strategic alliance, like a Salesforce, Microsoft, Adobe, so on. It's like you got three pillars that are very different from one another, and most people kind of treat them very differently and very siloed, hence the, what I call buckets. But if you treat it like an ecosystem or a community in this case, and you bring them all together, and how do you help them all thrive and work together, you create something very unique and very fun. And that's where, like, when I've had the most fun building programs, when I can bring them all together and treat them like a community. We did this really well at Drift, where we bring them all together once a month. Everyone was invited for this one big, I think we call it the news hour call that Nick Sal and I would run. And it was fascinating to watch these guys all begin to interact together. And you've got competing agencies in there. Very few times would you have competing tech companies, but it would happen. But we would treat this as an opportunity for us all to learn together and to learn from each other. And so I began to I even told Nick, I was like, I want to start to treat this like it's a community. I want to nurture it like it's a community, and I want to feed it, and I want to build it up like it's a community. So they were all working together, learning together, and that they're viewing this experience that happens once a month as something that's one of the most valuable opportunities for their general partner knowledge. Not just how to partner with Drift, but how to partner in general. And what we began to see happen was agencies began to work with other tech companies, and tech companies began to work with other agencies across the board as they began to see, like, all right, well, this is why Lyft AI is so great, right? This is what the work they're doing. This is why 2X has excelled so great. We would spotlight a different partner each month. We would give them some new training each month. If there was a product rollout, it would happen during that time, and they would all get a chance to riff on it, give us feedback on it, and hear from each other and how they're thinking about it. And I think not that that's the right way for every partner program to operate, but for me, I began to see like how this thing begins to take a life of its own. It becomes something bigger than just a revenue bucket.
Yeah. Well, what strikes me in the way you're describing your approach to this is that you weren't thinking of this as a zero-sum game for any one particular partner, right? One partner was going to have a large portion of the share of your audience's attention or of the ecosystem that you're trying to develop. You were restoring balance. You were making sure that your partners actually had this natural, I would say, balance in how they were going to show up and how you were going to show up for them, which I think really helps with the effectiveness, bidirectional effectiveness of your partnerships with them.
Yeah. And I think what makes any community thrive is the value that you can provide therein. And that's what we try to do in those sessions. And I think what any community is trying to do is like, how do you make this the most valuable use of your time. And if we're going to gather all these partners together for an hour, like, let's make this extraordinarily valuable. How can we learn how to do some peer-to-peer learning? How can we understand more of the product? How can we get to know more of the team? Did this at Terminus, where we would bring a new executive leader in every month to share, talk, something. And so it was a chance for them to get more value out of this partnership. And it wasn't always just about like, Terminus or Drift. It was about, the market at large. Like, one of the things I heard at Terminus a lot was like, ABM was still kind of becoming a thing. It's like, how can we do a better job of going to market with ABM? So I was like, all right, heard. Let's go put some training together and figure out how we can help you guys out in this instance.
Well, I was just going to ask exactly that, was how do you source what is valuable or what folks need help with within your communities? But it sounds like, just in how you described it, you're so close to their daily interactions or so close to their day-to-day that it's just clear and present right in front of you what they're struggling with and what they need help with.
It's a lot of active listening, and you're doing any sort of, mutual action planning. There's a few things you can really do to really hear and understand what they're trying to get after. Like, I'm trying to know, like, I want to know their business. Like, I want to know exactly like what their metrics are, what their KPIs are, how we plug into that, how Partners Large fit into that, like what they're driving to as a whole organization. And then, like I said earlier, I've got a few set of questions that I ask anytime I come into a program or take on a new partner. What's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confused, what are your expectations, what's going to make you your most valuable partner, and what do you need in order for you to be successful?
Yeah,
and if you start to listen, you understand
questions.
Like, all right, these are the things that they need. Like, when I was taking over Terminus, I remember clearly, like, what do you need, but what's missing? And they're like, we really need help going to market around ABM. Like, we know this is a thing, but like, we're struggling on how we go to market with this message and land more clients as a result and bring them into Terminus. I was like, okay, like, we can do this. Like, we are the experts. And so we help build some training around that.
Yeah. I mean, what is so interesting about where we are right now with the definition of community, like, we're coming off the tail end of community that was defined with that transaction really at the forefront, right? We were assembling folks as a reaction to COVID and what the constraints of COVID were introducing to our businesses. So folks were potentially impacted by layoffs, or they found themselves in a space where they just couldn't physically connect with folks that had been part of their community. Events were obsolete. In-person gatherings, user groups, meetups, things like that were just not available to folks. So they reassessed and brought folks together in communities, aka Slack groups.
Yeah.
And we are now on the back half of that, where folks are really reevaluating what gathering spaces look like for the communities that they're assembling. And y'all are up to some really fun stuff with how you're gathering folks in spaces. Tell me more about what you're up to.
Yeah. So my wife and I love a good gathering, love a good event. And again, we're very relational driven. It's like, how can we bring a group of people together for something extraordinarily intentional? And so we've been talking about it for years since we've lived here, about how can we do our own event in Bozeman, and we finally figured out a way to do it. So we launched this thing, Arcadia. It's got very much a nature feel to it. If you're watching video, this bear on my mic is our logo for Arcadia. So we lean into that Montana feel very much. And so we started talking like, let's do an event in Montana, quote unquote conference. We don't like calling it a conference, but for lack of a better term, that's where we are. So let's bring everybody to Montana, because, there's never a tech conference in Montana. So let's be the first. And let's put everybody outside, because that's what Montana is all about. And so we started to kind of venture down this path and do some exploring. We found a great location here in town. So what we put together was the Arcadia Leadership Experience. As one of the things that's very important to me is that to invest in leaders and to help them understand the trajectory of their career and growth and what they're building. So we launched Arcadia Leadership Experience to be specifically for leaders, director level and above. And how can we create an intentional gathering here in Montana for go-to-market leaders, whether it's a revenue leader, marketing leader. We had a couple of CEOs that come, and 40-ish% of the attendees were partnership people, which is great, because the approach and the angle we took on the content was like, how do we build these partner programs that fully exist within the go-to-market function? And in order for that to really happen, it couldn't just be a bunch of partner people sitting around a campfire, bitching about partnerships and why we're not getting the buy-in. So I was like, I want the marketing leader, I want the CRO, I want the revenue leader, and the partner leader to come together for an intentional conversation to talk about the job to be done and to share what's worked and how we can change the trajectory of what partnerships are doing. So without really realizing it, we had kind of assembled this little community to come together in Bozeman. It happened last July, and it exceeded every single expectation that I had for an event. You never know like what you're going to pull off when you do something a little bit different. And we put everybody in glamping teepees. There was not one element of Arcadia that was inside. Everything was outside. We had a massive wax canvas tent that we held our morning sessions in. And then the afternoons, you went out for lunch that was cooked outside. So you were set at these different picnic tables. And then immediately following lunch, you were broke into a different smaller group for like a facilitated cohort conversation. We had 5 groups within Arcadia Facilitator. So we were having this really intentional conversation. And then after that, you were broke into another small group to go do an experience. So we taught people how to fly fish. We did yoga, hiking. There was tea making from all the herbs and plants on property and all these different experiences you could do. And so what was happening was we kind of bookended the day. You started the day all together at this session. Some people got in the sauna early in the morning, which was nice. Then you started the whole day with this 50-person session. You broke into these different smaller groups. Then you ended the day around the campfire where we had a chef come make dinner over these open fires. We had conversations around the campfire after that evening afterwards. And so like you were all kind of gathered together. But what happened in between those things, I think, was the real magic of how you break people down into different groups, get them to meet each other. And so in about 2.5 days, we noticed that everyone had forged these really, really strong relationships. And so from there, we were like, there's something here to these smaller events, which in turn could mean that there's something to building smaller communities, which is what my wife and I are thinking about right now. It's like, how do we build this Arcadia community that we're about to launch into not to go super wide in numbers, but go super deep with the small group. You know, if it's Dunlop's Law, whatever it is 150 people, as much you can have in your circle, then maybe a community is right at 150 people, maybe 200, and then build something of that size and that nature, and then go super deep with that group. So again, we can go back to that value piece and provide as much value to that group of leaders as we possibly can within a year's time.
Can I just say how refreshing it was to hear you describe this unconference, this anti-conference format,
exactly
where
what we call it.
Fly fishing was
Yes.
the subject matter, rather than sitting and listening to yet another person speak about the same MQL dilemma that we've all been facing for the last decade, basically.
Exactly.
That great equalizer of the great outdoors is really powerful, if not cathartic, for some folks who are coming off of, the last decade of B2B events where it was a massive conference room floor and you were hustling around trying to meet as many people as possible. It felt like you were playing Pokemon Go in the professional sense. You're just like collecting as many people, exactly, as you could. And this actually completely dismantles the notion that your relationships at events have to be transactional. Like, you at the core are creating experiences, and those shared experiences is where connection ultimately happens.
Absolutely. 100%. I remember there was a point in time, 2 months before the event, my wife and I sat on our back patio, and I was like, let's lay out a list of intentions, of what we want people to walk away with, how we want them to feel. Like, let's be extraordinarily intentional with how we put this thing together. And now you get into the stuff that I actually love. It's like, far as like building these experiences and like why we chose the name Arcadia. It's like Arcadia means harmony and the idyllic version of natural splendor at its core. So like, what we're trying to build within partnerships is harmony between the partner organization, the revenue team, marketing team, product, CS, etc. But also like what my wife and I are extraordinarily passionate about is how do we find that harmony within ourselves, which is a lot of what we try to bring into the Friends with Benefits podcast. Like, what's the work that we have to do in order to find that harmony, to build those right relationships, and to bring that into everything that we do? And there's no better place to find that than in nature. Like, I think science has actually proven that. Tim Ferriss talks a lot about it. Adam Grant just put up a big post about it. It's like some of these well-known thought leaders are now recognizing it and talking about it. And there's a lot of science into like spending time outside and how it actually reinvigorates you, and those experiences that you're not normally doing when you're doing something different, how it begins to change the mindset. And Huberman talks a lot about that, and like that and interior cortex or whatever in your brain, like how those things that you do that are different, challenging and hard, whether it's sleeping outside. There are a few folks that were like, so you mean like we're actually going to sleep outside in tents? Like, are there snakes? I was like, no, but there might be bears. There were no bears. I mean, there were bugs,
but I don't know. Do I choose the bear? I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather choose the Bay Area in Montana.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, and like exactly what you're saying is why we wanted to put this on here in Bozeman for the group of people that we did, and it was something. It's hard to like share how special it actually was without being there, but it was one of the most special things that I've been a part of, and I was just grateful that it was something that my wife and I got to do.
So fantastic, and we are so aligned on the fact that connection to the self is the starting point for any of the concentric circles of the connection to your team, connection to your customers, connection to your communities, and to your partnerships. So this is such a powerful experience that you're offering to folks. So you're hosting this again in July of this coming year. If folks who are listening to this want to get involved, want to potentially put their hat in the ring to join,
yeah.
How do they learn more?
Yeah, you can go to arcadialeadershipexperience.com. It is an apply to attend. We're very specific on who we want to come and be a part of this. We risk losing some attendees by not letting everyone come in, but that's okay. We want the right group of people there. We want leaders there specifically, and those that we know are kind of in the trenches and getting the work done and can contribute to a greater conversation at large. Like our Slack channel that we have with the group that came last year is still extraordinarily active, still helping people on a daily basis. And it's just really great to see, and that we're able to kind of bring the right group together.
Was you're thinking about what's on the horizon, which in Montana, I'm sure runs abound. You have plenty of horizon to contemplate this on. Yeah. What is on the horizon? What do you hope is just beyond the horizon for how we define communities or how we express community in the work that we do, especially in the business context?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we were thinking and talking a lot about right now. And like we did an event that was extraordinarily different, right? And as a result, we kind of want to build a community that's a bit different. What that looks like, I don't know. I think there is something to this smaller number of people in a community. I'm kind of excited by the idea of going around 150, 200 people in a community. And that's the next thing on our horizon, is like how we begin to bring these people together to provide them with this level of value that we provided at this event, right? For both the professional and the person. Some of the channels we're setting up in our platform now, there's one for like, GTM, professional, and there's one for the person. Like, how do we help you find that harmony within yourself and find that better person? And how do we help challenge you to do bigger, better, greater things? And, that's exactly what we're trying to strive for here, is like teach these leaders to go for more. Like my closing talk at Arcadia last year was like around that kind of originated from my sign off. It's be great, be Arcadia. We want you to be great. We want you to be Arcadia, which means to be harmonious, be the best version of yourself, continue to challenge and grow and strengthen yourself in your life and your career. And be Arcadia too is kind of cheeky because it looks like, if you look at our website, Be Arcadia, it looks like Bear Cadia, which is why we have bear as the logo. So it really throws people off.
Well, there it is. We love a little hidden something in there. Your branding is impeccable, but also your brand ethos is impeccable. And I'm really hopeful for this thesis that you're exploring and expanding upon. And I'm hopeful for the folks that come out of these experiences and at the hybrid of the person and the professional, we find ourselves just genuinely better connected to ourselves and to each other.
Absolutely.
It was such a pleasure to get to chat with you today, Yarby. I am so shocked that we haven't actually crossed paths before. We've been orbiting each other. But at this point in time, based on our journeys and where we are, it makes a lot of sense that we've crossed paths now. And I can't wait to celebrate you and your wife, Sam, on the journey that lies ahead. Can't wait to see more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating, fun conversation. Thank you for allowing me the time on your podcast.
Of course, anytime.